Sony headquarters, New York, March 2002. A conference room packed with executives, lawyers, and witnesses. Michael Jackson sits at a table, the Sony contract spread out in front of him. 127 pages that promised partnership but delivered control. Tommy Mottola stands at a podium, pointing directly at MJ, his voice sharp. "You signed this deal. You agreed to these terms." The room is silent, except for the hum of fluorescent lights. MJ's lawyer taps page 47 with his pen, the clause about reasonable commercial efforts. This isn't a trial, it's a deposition. Sony's legal team is trying to bury the Invincible sabotage before it becomes a public war. But MJ came prepared with numbers. $30 million album budget, $5 million marketing spend, $200 million in underpayments over 10 years. Tommy's finger stays pointed. MJ doesn't flinch. 3 months from now, that finger point will be on a poster in Times Square. What happened in that room that made MJ decide to burn everything down? In 1991, Sony bought CBS Records for $2 billion and put Tommy Mottola in charge of the entire music empire. He was 42, sharp, connected, and he knew how to close deals. Michael Jackson walked into Sony headquarters in Manhattan that November, already the biggest artist on the planet. Thriller had sold 66 million copies. Bad moved 35 million. The meeting room smelled like leather and coffee. MJ's lawyer sat beside him, flipping through pages, but MJ barely looked down. Tommy slid the contract across the table. 127 pages, master recordings agreement, $1 billion over 15 years. "You'll own everything," Tommy said. What he meant was Sony would own the masters and MJ would own the earnings. Sort of. MJ signed it because he trusted Tommy. This was Mariah Carey's husband. The deal made headlines. Biggest contract in music history. The thumbnail moment was the handshake, Tommy's smile, the flash of cameras. Page 47 had a clause about reasonable commercial efforts. Nobody read it. Between 1991 and 1995, it looked like the smartest deal anyone ever made. Dangerous dropped in November 91 and sold 32 million copies worldwide. Tommy promoted MJ like his career depended on it, because it did. Every music video got funded, every single got radio play, every tour got full backing. Sony's stock climbed. MJ's fame reached untouchable levels. He bought the Beatles catalogue for $47.5 million and suddenly owned half the most valuable song rights on earth. Tommy called him twice a week. They had dinners. MJ performed at Sony events. The relationship felt like a partnership because when you're winning, control looks like collaboration. MJ's team didn't question budgets. Tommy's team didn't question MJ's spending. The contract sat in a filing cabinet in Sony's legal department, untouched. But MJ kept his own records, receipts, budgets, correspondence. People close to him said he never trusted anyone completely, not even when things were good. Control looks like partnership when you're winning. That's the trap. By 1995, something shifted. Tommy Mottola and Mariah Carey divorced that year, and the personal connection between Tommy and MJ started fraying. MJ noticed small things first. Approval delays on music videos, budget discussions that never used to happen, promotional pushes that felt smaller. History released in June 1995. A double album, ambitious, expensive. It sold 20 million copies, which would be a triumph for anyone else. But Tommy's team treated it like a disappointment. MJ started asking questions. Why was the marketing budget cut? Why weren't certain singles getting pushed? Tommy's answers were always vague. Shifting strategy, market conditions, maximizing efficiency. The contract still sat in that filing cabinet, but MJ asked his team to pull a copy. He wanted to see what he'd actually signed. His lawyer brought it to Neverland Ranch in a leather folder. MJ didn't read all 127 pages that night, but he started keeping closer track of every dollar Sony spent and every dollar they didn't. From 1997 to 2001, MJ spent $30 million recording what would become Invincible. He brought in Rodney Jerkins, Teddy Riley, every top producer in the industry. He recorded in studios across Los Angeles, New York, and Sweden. Tommy fought him on nearly every expense. "This is too much," Tommy told Sony's board. "He's spending like it's 1985. But MJ wasn't trying to relive the past. He was trying to prove he was still relevant after the scandals, the allegations, the years of tabloid warfare that nearly destroyed him. The album took shape slowly. 16 tracks, polished to perfection, every detail obsessed over. Meanwhile, Tommy was already planning something else. People close to the situation later said Tommy viewed Invincible as MJ's last album under the contract. So why spend money promoting a product that would only increase MJ's leverage for the next deal? The logic was cold but clear. By the time MJ delivered the finished album in 2001, Tommy had already decided to bury it. MJ just didn't know it yet. Invincible, released on October 30th, 2001. The marketing budget, $5 million. Industry standard for an artist of MJ's caliber was $15 to $20 million minimum. No music videos funded. No singles sent to radio with serious backing. Sony's promotional strategy felt like they were releasing an album by a mid-tier artist, not the king of pop. The album still sold 6 million copies in the first year on MJ's name alone. But MJ saw what was happening. Tommy told Sony's board in a closed meeting, "MJ is past his prime. He's not worth the investment anymore." That line got back to MJ through someone inside Sony's offices. The thumbnail moment was the promotional budget spreadsheet. Half empty. Entire line items crossed out. MJ sat in his home studio at Neverland Ranch holding that document. And for the first time in his career, he realized he wasn't being sabotaged by the media or by tabloids. He was being sabotaged by his own label. By the man who promised him partnership. Early 2002, MJ made a decision. He hired a forensic accounting team, specialists who audit entertainment contracts and trace money through corporate structures. They started with a simple question. Where did all the money go? Over 3 months, they audited every Sony contract, every payment, every royalty statement going back to 1991. What they found was staggering. MJ had been underpaid by an estimated $200 million over 10 years through creative accounting, withheld royalties, and budget manipulations. But the real discovery came when they pulled the original contract from Sony's archives. Page 47, Clause 14b. It stated that if Sony failed to provide reasonable commercial efforts to promote MJ's work, MJ could trigger early termination of the entire agreement. The accountants showed MJ the Invincible budget compared to industry standards. The case was clear. Sony had violated the contract. MJ had the proof. He could walk away. But he wanted something more than freedom. He wanted Tommy Mottola destroyed. Reverend Al Sharpton approached MJ in March 2002 about racial discrimination in the music industry. Sharpton had been building a case about how major labels systematically underpromoted black artists while favoring white artists with identical or lesser talent. MJ listened. Then he told Sharpton about Tommy, about the buried album, about the $200 million, about page 47. Suddenly, MJ realized this wasn't just business, It was systematic. Tommy Mottola had a history. He'd blocked black executives from advancing at Sony, steered resources toward white pop acts, and treated black artists as expendable once their commercial peak passed. MJ and Sharpton formed a plan. Go public. Expose Tommy. Use the media as a weapon. Trigger the contract clause in the most visible, damaging way possible. MJ knew what it would cost him personally. Invincible would never get the promotion it deserved. His reputation might take another hit. But he was willing to sacrifice his own album to win the war. Some battles are worth losing if your enemy loses everything. July 6, 2002, Times Square. The double-decker bus. MJ stands above the crowd holding the poster. Tommy Mottola is the devil. Reverend Al Sharpton stands beside him with a megaphone. They hand out flyers with numbers. $30 million album, $5 million promotion. You do the math. The media swarms, cameras everywhere. MJ speaks directly. Sony has sabotaged my album because Tommy Mottola is a racist who has systematically discriminated against black artists for years. The words hit like a bomb. Sony's stock drops 4% in a single day. $300 million in market value evaporates. Tommy Mottola, watching from his office, calls an emergency board meeting. The thumbnail image that goes global. MJ on the bus, poster in hand, thousands of fans chanting below, security forming a wall around him. The protest lasts 3 hours. By the time MJ steps off that bus, every major news outlet in America is running the story. Tommy's phone rings non-stop. Sony's lawyers are already preparing responses. But the damage is done. The war is public now. MJ appears on national television, ABC, NBC, CNN. He shows the numbers on camera. $30 million to produce Invincible. $5 million to promote it. You do the math. He names Tommy Mottola directly, calls for his resignation, states clearly that this is about racial discrimination in the music industry. Other artists start coming forward, anonymously at first. Stories of similar treatment, albums buried, budgets slashed, promotional support pulled right when it mattered most. The pattern is undeniable. Tommy fights back through Sony's PR team. Michael Jackson is unstable. This is a desperate attempt to deflect from his own declining relevance. But the numbers don't lie. Wall Street analysts start asking questions. If Sony is sabotaging its own artists, what does that say about leadership? The board receives letters from shareholders demanding explanations. MJ's legal team leaks selected pages from the contract to industry insiders. Not page 47 yet, but enough to show the restrictive terms, the control mechanisms, the ways Sony structured deals to trap artists in perpetual dependency. Tommy holds a press conference, denies everything, calls MJ's accusations baseless and defamatory. But his voice has that edge. People who know him recognize it. He's rattled. MJ doesn't respond publicly. He doesn't need to. The pressure is building exactly as planned. While the public war rages, MJ moves quietly behind the scenes. He refinances his stake in the Beatles' catalogue, securing a $300 million loan from Bank of America. The press covers the protest. Nobody notices the financial maneuver. Sony can't lose MJ completely. The catalogue rights are too valuable, the partnership too profitable in the long term. But now they have to negotiate from a position of weakness. MJ's lawyers finally reveal page 47, clause 14b, to Sony's legal team. The contract clause is now public knowledge. Entertainment lawyers across the industry start examining their own clients' Sony contracts. What they find is stunning. Tommy Mottola buried similar clauses in more than 40 artist agreements over the previous decade. The same restrictive language, the same traps, the same mechanisms of control disguised as partnership. Some of those artists are still under contract. Some are already planning their exit strategies. Sony's board realizes the scope of the potential liability. If artists start triggering these clauses, the entire label structure could collapse. The choice becomes clear. Keep Tommy Mottola and fight dozens of legal battles, or cut him loose and try to salvage the relationships. MJ uses the protest as distraction, while his team builds the legal case that will force Sony's hand. If you're hooked now, wait till you see how this ends. December 2002. Tommy Mottola announces he's stepping down as chairman and CEO of Sony Music Entertainment. The official statement says he's pursuing other opportunities and leaving on excellent terms. Sony won't say why, but insiders know. MJ's team leaked the page 47 evidence to the Wall Street Journal 2 weeks earlier. The article detailed how Mottola structured contracts to give Sony maximum control while providing minimal transparency to artists. The board held an emergency meeting. The question on the table: keep Tommy and fight a public war with Michael Jackson and potentially dozens of other artists, or protect the company's long-term value by removing the source of the controversy. They chose survival. The thumbnail moment is Tommy's resignation letter. 1 paragraph, 3 sentences, no explanation. MJ doesn't celebrate publicly. He releases a brief statement. "I hope this brings positive change to the music industry." But people close to him said he kept a copy of that resignation letter in a frame at Neverland Ranch. Not as a trophy, as a reminder. The war cost MJ too. Invincible never got the promotional campaign it deserved. His public image took another hit from the media coverage. Some fans questioned why he'd go to war with his own label. But he won the point that mattered. Tommy Mottola was gone. The system was exposed. And every artist in the industry now knew. Read page 47. The real cost came later. Between 2001 and 2003, Sony's market capitalization dropped by nearly $2 billion. Not all of it was MJ's doing, but analysts cited the Mottola controversy as a significant factor in investor confidence erosion. MJ renegotiated his contract in 2003, gaining increased control over his catalog and better royalty terms. Invincible never received proper promotion, but it proved MJ's point. Even with minimal support, he could move millions of units on name recognition alone. Tommy Mottola lost his music industry influence overnight. He tried consulting, producing, managing smaller artists, but the stain of the MJ war followed him everywhere. Other artists used MJ's blueprint to renegotiate their own deals, forcing Sony and other labels to revise contract standards across the industry. The music business changed. Not completely, not permanently, but for a few years, artists had leverage they'd never had before. MJ paid for it with Invincible's commercial potential. The album could have been massive with proper promotion. Instead, it became the symbol of the war he chose to fight. Some people called it career suicide. Others called it the most principled stand any major artist had ever taken against label exploitation. Both were true. June 25, 2009. Michael Jackson dies in Los Angeles at age 50. 4 months later, Sony buys the full rights to the Beatles' catalogue and MJ's masters for $750 million. The contract that started everything, the one signed in 1991 with Tommy Mottola's smile and the buried clause on page 47, is now referenced in music law courses across the country. Law professors teach it as the Mottola trap, a cautionary tale about reading every word, understanding every clause, and never trusting that partnership means equality. MJ never got his masters back during his lifetime, but he destroyed the man who took them. The contract still exists in Sony's archives, yellowed pages in a leather folder, the signature in black ink, page 47, marked with a red tab that someone added years later. Whether MJ planned the whole war from the beginning or discovered the battle halfway through, nobody knows for certain. Some say he signed that contract in 1991, already knowing he'd have to fight. Others believe he trusted Tommy completely until the betrayal became undeniable. The truth is probably somewhere between legend and fact, the way most truth is when it involves people who live in public and die in private. Sometimes winning means making sure they lose. The contract stayed. The legend never left.